SFPS meeting to order. Board Member Noble is on her way, and we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la República que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. As we salute the flag of the state of Mexico, we see the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el simbología de la amistad perfecta en entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal lands. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you very much. Next is the approval of the agenda. Superintendent, do we need to make any changes?
No changes this evening, Board President Bozay.
All right. Can I have a motion, please?
I move approval of the agenda.
I'll second. Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving along to introduction of the interpreter.
Thank you, Board President Bozay. With our introduction tonight is Deputy Superintendent Vanessa Romero.
Para asistencia de traducción en español, el señor
Bose, excuse me, members of the board and Superintendent Chavez, we had a school supply giveaway today at Santa Fe High, and it was supposed to be from 11 till 2 or until all the supplies were gone. It lasted 20 minutes. There were cars, oh, it was unreal. But it was, people were very appreciative, and I hope that they, those that didn't get supplies, that there's lots of other places, and I hope they find those places.
Yep.
There was about 400 we gave out.
Yep.
Wow. That's a lot of school supplies to give away.
And the high school students' bags were gone first. And that was surprising to me and to others.
Very much appreciate that. And thank you for being there. Any other board announcements or follow-up? All right, you're up, Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Bose, members of the board. I just want to piggyback real quick off of Dr. Gonzalez's comments. I want to thank the team that really put it together. We had at least 15, 20 of our staff members out there giving away bags. And again, we heard a lot of great things from those that received bags. We saw carloads of students. They were excited about school. They couldn't wait to start. So that was always great to hear. But again, it's a great way for us to partner with the city. The mayor was also out there giving away bags. So we want to thank everybody who showed up. Moving on to my announcements, just a little recap over summer programming. As you guys know, this is our second year that we offered free summer programming to any Santa Fe Public School student. Last year, just to recap, we had 33 summer programs being offered, and we had over 2,600 students participate on a voluntary basis. This year, we had over 40 programs being offered, and we had over 3,300 students participate on a voluntary basis in the months of June and July. This was an increase of 500, almost 600 students over the previous year. It also, it's equivalent to about 30% of our district's enrollment. So again, want to really thank our community partners, our schools, our employees who volunteered to put them on, and it really is making a difference because we are seeing some leading indicators that we're making change as far as student outcomes by being creative with summer programming, internships, and standards-based instruction. So I want to thank everybody who partners with us in the summer because it really is making a difference. I want to also mention that we just concluded, and I want to thank board members Kate Noble and Dr. Gonzalez for being there, a work-based learning ceremony. We had over 100 interns participate this summer, and we had over 20, if I remember correctly, 24 businesses participate in the summer internship work. Wonderful ceremony, a lot of great support, a lot of great words from our business partners, from the city, and again, it's really about transforming what work-based learning is and making sure that it's equitable, it's a level playing field, and that everybody has access to participate in it. So I want to say thank you to our business partners, to the city, to the school board, because you guys were really behind this, behind our work with free summer programming and work-based learning. So I want to thank everybody for that. Just a quick note on vacancies, teacher vacancies, to be exact. We are, as of today, at an all-time low as far as teacher vacancies. We are at 33, and we're continuing to hire. We had new hire orientation today, so it is ongoing. Students come back next Tuesday. I'm pushing the team to try to get that number with a 2 in front of it rather than a 3. So again, we're working hard. We have 2 nurse aides still vacant, a little over 2 nurses. We have 12 educational assistants that support special ed. We also have only two EAs and 2 secretaries, 1 early childhood educator. So it continues to shrink, but we're not going to be satisfied until we have no vacancies. So that is a good note. We also want to just give everybody a quick update. Last we met, we talked about special ed programming and the contract that we tentatively approved with work to be completed over the next month. It's it's good to report to you guys that it is in-house. That contract was voided. We have fully staffed that program. We are moving forward with it, and so I want to thank the union, President Grace Mayer. She was a great partner in discussing it, developing the MOU, and also, I saw him over here earlier, Mr. Jeff Pinkerton, our executive director, and Mr. Michael Hagley really leading the work with the union and putting this together. So great accomplishment for the district, and want to thank everybody who was involved with that. Then last but not least, we had a great first day with teachers returning. The team and I spent all morning, almost all day, at different sites, talking to teachers, talking to staff, EAs, student nutrition workers, giving welcomes. This will be ongoing tomorrow as well. And then again, we're prepping for students to return on Tuesday. And that does conclude my announcements.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. Kudos to that recruitment and retention of teachers and the improvement in the HR processes that we've put a lot of work into over the last few years. That's exciting news and wonderful for our students, of course. Any other questions or comments from the board on the superintendent updates?
I'm really looking forward to Tuesday.
We all are. Yes, Board Member Noble.
Do you know off the top of your head what our summer graduation was and where we ended the year with graduation rates?
Graduation rates will not be coming out until, we're hoping, January or February. The state's still behind of the previous year. We still have not received those from 2 years ago. So we're still waiting on those graduation rates to be confirmed and sent out and published. We had 54 summer graduates, which again, 40 summer graduates, and the grand total is now over 700, if I remember correctly. And again, we're hoping, knock on wood, that it is another high for the Santa Fe Public Schools. We were mid 80%, 84 if I remember correctly. We're hoping, again, our goal is to be #1 in the state for large districts, so that is our goal whenever those rates come out. So a grand total of almost 800 students graduated from Santa Fe Public Schools this year.
That's great news. And I'm also really pleased about that, the special ed contract. Great work to the team and, thinking outside the box and being creative. I think that feels much better to all of us, and we appreciate the work that went into that.
Do you mind if sorry, Board President Jose, do you mind if I add one more?
No,
real
please.
Quick? A couple of weeks ago, we hosted the Legislative Education Study Committee. Went very, very well. They were very impressed with the innovation, what we're doing, the commitment to really pushing forward in innovative ways. Heard a lot of great comments afterwards from legislators and not our own. Really noting that they wished other large districts followed our lead and that they will really be pushing that message forward. So I want to thank those of you guys in attendance. I know Assistant Superintendent Casals was there testifying on one of the days. Also, our Executive Director of Student Wellness was there on the last day talking about counselors. And then you were with me as well as Dr. Gonzalez giving our opening remarks. So went very well. They were impressed. I know I had a couple of legislators when we were showing them the facility just talking my ears off about how they can support us. They're allies of ours, and they really want us to continue to move forward.
Awesome. All right. There's a little rearrangement in our agenda this evening so that we can have board discussion and possible action earlier in the night, and that starts with our reimagining process.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Bozé, members of the board. We did rearrange it a little bit, kind of group them together. That way it wasn't too splintered. And I did see her, walk in. One of our co-chairs of the Reimagining Steering Committee, Dr. Veronica Garcia, who used to be our superintendent, many of our supervisors and boss. And I'll turn it over right now to Board Member Kate Noble.
Thanks very much. I probably won't do much of the details. I'll leave that to Dr. Garcia because, she's the boss. No, we have continued to work on reimagining and have finished really the first first year of gathering information and are moving more into the next year where we do the things. So we do have two policies, the second reading of our first policy coming out of Reimagining, Reimagining Strong and Supportive School Community Commitment to Student Engagement, and then we have a first reading tonight for an amended policy on the realignment of district school facilities. And thank you, Superintendent and President Bozé, for putting these all together on the agenda. It seems like something that we need the context for all of it or benefit from that. So with that, Dr. Garcia is going to give us a recap and update on the reimagining.
Apprenticeship programs and grow your own teachers and staff, HR systems, onboarding and hiring processes, and coaching versus mentoring. And there's just so many rich ideas around that theme. The third theme that came out was student recruitment and retention. And marketing and being proactive, right? Fifth and sixth grade, 8th grade, looking at visits. Kind of this used to happen in olden to the incoming, or the school they were going to, and spent a day or two, and maybe their parents being able to go in the evening. Brand awareness. Interestingly enough, even talk about school consolidation. A whole lot about middle school and how our middle schools are structured, and that's something that we'll be taking a very strong look at this year, as when I talk about what the two major areas are, and also building a culture of trust and safety and marketing, both internally and externally. A lot of conversation that sometimes we're our own worst enemies from within, and how we can do a better job of telling when parents ask us what we think about our schools. Many times our staff really don't know fully all of the amazing programs in the district. That was one of the biggest eye-openers to me, how much our own principals even don't know about programs across the district.
bilingual education also surfaced. Ideas about now this is not exactly bilingual ed, but a temporary newcomer program for students that are new to the district, TESOL endorsements, but also what we heard is that there is a desire for true bilingual education programming, which means you have kids who are Spanish speakers, but also English dominant. So it's very difficult to have a true bilingual program if your school is 95% monolingual Spanish, right? And so a desire from our parents across the city for bilingual programming, Midtown, East Side. So, these are ideas that are definitely worth exploring. And then around magnet schools and special programs, and again, middle grade, transportation came up a lot. And access, right, equitable access, and creating a pathway for an application for innovation schools, and tremendous ideas came out, from outdoor learning to Montessori to film production. I mean, the ideas here, it's a gold mine. So with that, the steering committee consolidated these to recruitment and retention, right, of staff and talent management, and looking at HR systems, and then combine middle grades and specialty programs, and kind of weaving in these concepts, whether we're talking about bilingual education or social emotional learning or creative programming that our community wants, is what we'll be focusing on this year. So I want to emphasize that we have spent almost the entire year listening. And now this year will be to take these ideas and, my favorite word, concretize, and to bring forth then recommendations to the superintendent and to the board to decide, as you build budget for next year, what is doable. You can't do lots and lots of things, but prioritize, okay, where are we moving next? So after this year of broad-based stakeholder engagement and analysis of the data, the work accomplished, you're seeing some of it today, as Board Member Noble stated. Student engagement was super important, and Board Member Gonzalez and Secretary, do I have your title correct? Abeta gave us a lot of input and help with that, and we worked with the community, and hence you're going to see the second read of that policy tonight. The second policy that you're going to be seeing this evening is the first read of realignment. It has an interesting title. Realignment of district, school, and facilities to support positive student outcomes. This is an existing policy, Policy 534, but highly amended to address the issues at hand that is not only plaguing Santa Fe and the state, but the entire nation of declining enrollment. It's fascinating, actually. And when Mr. Granada approached me this evening, it's always scary when a lawyer comes to talk to you, especially before a presentation. I'm like, oh no, what's wrong with the policy? But he just wanted to warn me, so I'm going to warn the board, that for some reason the commas in that first paragraph are invisible and are only visible to Mr. Granada when he printed them again. So it's not one huge run-on sentence. There are some commas in there. But we'll talk about this policy in a minute. But I think that this work here, this was a big discussion, right, about fiscal responsibility, about caring about programming and having program lead, not necessarily the dollars and cents, and coming up with a way to deal with these real structural issues without pulling out the rug from under our families, right? Nobody wants to do that. So a lot of thought. Is probably not perfect, but that's why it's a first read, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. I want to stress that, again, transportation is huge, and thoughts around that, to have equity in access as could be hub hub busing, right, like we do for some of the charters, and figuring out more creative ways. Superintendents did a lot of research with the state to see what's allowable, and I think we have some room to be a little more creative. Board Vice President Anderson, I know, is very interested in us working on a resolution to that end, so that will be part of the reimagining process. So where we are for this year, as I said, that we're going to focus on talent recruitment and retention to include systems improvement in the Human Resources Department and student recruitment and retention / magnet schools and specialty programs. But we will be taking a very strong look also at middle grades. And how can we have better programming at the K-8s, right? And how do we look at specialty and magnet programs for schools like Milagro and Ortiz that could have more kids in their schools? And how do we get the word out about the exciting things that are happening there? So the board will be notified. We have some changes on the steering committee, so you might need to give us a name or two if someone has dropped out that was in your district. The executive committee, which is the superintendent, and Ms. Noble and myself looked at that. Mr. Chavez will be notifying both parents and staff if you have been added to the steering committee. And we'll have our first, I'll be working with staff before then, but we will have our first meeting. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's after Labor Day, right? Maybe the first Thursday after Labor Day. So that's where I'm at with the update. Have I missed something, Ms. Noble or Superintendent Chavez?
You've done a great job of recapping. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's kind of, there's so much more. Like, I would love to talk for 2 hours, but you all wouldn't appreciate that. So. And Ms. Noble said just to hang out here by the mic as we move
Thank
forward.
you very much,
And
Dr.
Mr.
Garcia.
Granada, you can be.
Does anyone have any questions about the reimagining update? Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, President Bose. It's less a question and more just a comment. I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Garcia said, that I'm very interested in working on a resolution regarding transportation. As Member Noble pointed out to me recently, that is one of the things I ran on.
Same.
that and improving our interzone transfer system, which I think actually ties in quite well with transportation. So Superintendent and Dr. Garcia, I'd love for us to talk more about it. It'll be my first resolution.
Let's work on it.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then we can go on to the second reading of new policy 356, reimagining strong and supportive school community commitment to student engagement.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the second reading, so I'll just briefly go through some of the highlights. It is a commitment to student engagement. The policy strengthens the board's commitment to communication methods that are welcoming and accessible to our secondary level students. It provides a systematic way to ensure that the Board of Education and senior district leadership and principals can hear the unfiltered voice of students. We are going to expand the agendas of student councils to get input on improving school climate, programming, and address problems as identified by the students. Create a mechanism that the student councils can provide regular input to the student board members, who then can communicate their concerns to the Board of Education. Creates a capacity and space for student voice to influence the culture, climate, and opportunities that shape student experiences. Supports the student Board of Education members to lead a town hall at their respective school sites to acquire input from students on issues that they feel are going well and where there could be improvements. To ensure the biannual reports from the student board members are presented to the Board of Education and the superintendent. To annually administer a climate survey to students no later than April 30th of each school year. earlier, the systemization of student engagement and input to help influence board and district site-based decision-making and provide the appropriate professional development to the student council and other club sponsors as appropriate on ways to improve and enhance student engagement at their respective schools. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Garcia, board member Dr. Gonzalez, the different parents and organizations that participated. The Club Teen Center in Santa Fe opened their doors to us and their members, and with that, this is the work that came out of the student engagement process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If everyone is in agreement, can we have a motion? Question?
I should have asked this last week, and I will vote to approve in just a second, but I just wanted to make sure, Superintendent, that we'd have staff support for all of these things here.
Yes, Vice President Anderson, we will. Once it's approved, we've been talking about how we're going to staff it, how we're going to get the information out. So once, hopefully it is approved tonight, and once it is approved, then we start moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, Member Noble?
I guess I would just say I really appreciate the work here, and it feels very appropriate to me that our first adoption, second reading, coming out of Reimagining is about the students. And, you know, I really want to reiterate the thanks to everyone in the community who has given input and ideas so far. And I appreciate the work here. I think it's pretty elegant because it uses existing structures and reinforces and strengthens them so that hopefully we, the board and district leadership, can have the students' voices be more robust in our processes in an ongoing way. So with that, I'll move approval.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Cheers to this awesome new policy. Thank you for all the work. Next, we have the first reading of amended policy 534 that Dr. Garcia just mentioned, the realignment of district school facilities.
Thank you very much, President Bozé. So on this one, obviously it's our first reading, and thank you, Dr. Garcia, for the long years of thought and work around this. By way of a little more context and recap, of course, when we committed to the reimagining process, we wove in the concept of equity and increasing equity across the district. And then we had a pandemic, and then we came back to the reimagining process, and of course we've all been still sort of emerging from the pandemic and all the things that happened then. But ultimately, foundationally, I think what we've learned and seen, and certainly what I've seen through the years in my service on the board, is that schools are community. And we're seeing that now with the closing of the Santa Fe Waldorf School and the impacts of that community there. And ultimately, even that school is facing the same things that our district and many of our schools and a lot of schools are facing, which is declining enrollment, and as Dr. Garcia mentioned. And there's a lot of factors in there, and I think we all know that, but the increase in housing prices in Santa Fe that's been going on for a long, long time and that got steeper during the pandemic is one reason that we have fewer families and children because it's expensive to live here. We have a high proportion of charter schools, and in my opinion, a little bit of we've lost the plot on what charter schools are for and when we should approve them and not, but you know, that's not my job. So, but ultimately, you know, we did a different board, and then this board has sort of reaffirmed the commitment to increasing equity throughout the district through this process. And ultimately, I believe that this policy that does include a lot of thinking and a lot of wisdom looking at things like we have wildly different class sizes across the district. You know, some classes that are very, very small and some classes that are very, very large. We want to get qualified teachers in every classroom, and, you know, the special education services and other support services and programs that we need, counseling, all of this is a part of the equity picture that we need to work on across this district, because it is wildly different from different parts of town and different sizes of schools. I think that this puts in place some important tools that will, as our cover sheet says, minimize disruption, work with the school community, and I think that's what this is about, is when we do realignment, we have got to come from a place of understanding schools as community and working with the school community to minimize disruption and to let students and families and communities move in happy, healthy ways. There is considerable notice, again, as our cover sheet says, in a phase-in approach to school closure or realignment listed here. And, you know, an important thing that we propose to provide a preference in transfers for any students who would be displaced. So there would be really a long time for any school closure or realignment to happen, to work with the community, to minimize disruption, to steward the students and the learning and the families into a new community. And as we look at a lot of what Dr. Garcia touched upon, the exciting things we can do with the district, that gold mine of ideas that we got from the community, hopefully we can get to places where we are better serving our students, we are better meeting them with relevance and interest and strong instruction and, you know, doing what we need to do better. And again, you know, it's always been this, we can't just have a sort of slow strangulation of public education. We have to think about doing things that make it better. And I think that this is some foundational tools for us to responsibly steward towards a more equitable district in the future. So with that, I will ask Dr. Garcia if she wants to add anything or take us through the particulars here.
I can take you through the particulars. I think, you know, one of the other things that, you know, didn't wind up in the summary that we don't talk about a lot is, and you touched on it in terms of PTR and whatnot, right? And
sorry, even I lost you at PTR.
Public pupil-teacher ratios.
Okay.
And in small schools, and I know you get the personalization, but what kids don't get are a lot of services. They get partial services because, so they're not getting the full benefit of the programming that is available just because of that. The second piece is something that people don't understand. I think probably the board does, and Mr. Chavez and I do, that the legislature doesn't understand is year after year, Santa Fe Public Schools gets lots of money, and then you have to cut. And they don't understand, why are you cutting when you're getting all these extra resources? And again, it goes to economies of scale and how dollars are being spent, where we could potentially provide even more programming that would benefit our students. So all of those things, I think, are at play when you're having declining enrollment and yet maintaining the same level. But with that said, I think this is a good step forward in trying to take an existing policy. So this is, the board, if you'll notice, this is existing policy 534. So what little remains in black, you have it in black and red in front of you. So I'll just go ahead and read it, and perhaps you can interject where the commas and whatnot are that are actually there, and periods. It may be necessary from time to time for the district to realign its school and facilities to assure that they support its students to attain positive student outcomes. And we chose those words carefully it's not just about achievement. I mean, it is, but, you know, we do want our kids to be proficient, but we also want them to be socially well-adjusted and contributing members of our society and engaged in clubs and activities and have a rich school experience, right? So student outcomes and equity goals. Changes may be required because of shifts of the composition of the student body. Have I missed anything yet? Okay, so comma right there. Declining enrollment, when facilities have become inefficient, or to rebuild or refurbish the building, and this is super important, is not fiscally responsible or feasible. Okay? Then realignment may involve the construction of new schools, conversions of the use of a facility, consolidation of schools, or the closure of existing schools. Period at the end there, and there's a couple of commas in there, but when you get the second read, we promise it'll look better. In all cases, the district will work with parents, students, and staff of affected schools to minimize the disruption caused by any changes. That's existing language. Now all the rest is new language. To that end, if the district determines that a school site must be closed or repurposed, when possible, the district will do the following. 1, provide a 3-year grace period for students and families to make the appropriate plans for their children by stopping admissions for the earliest grades after the board decides to make the change. For example, year 1 could be kindergarten, year 2, kindergarten and first grade, year 3, kinder first and second. So you would see the other kids would matriculate out. The same could hold true if we ever had to close a high school or a secondary program, right? 9th, 10th, 11th, or a middle school. Okay? The grace period allows for students and families adequate time for planning. And as we have had to, I remember I went through it a couple of times in both tenures as superintendent, and others have in between, is nothing is worse when you hear school's going to close next year. And people have bought houses or they've made plans and their whole world turns upside down. Now, when a school's enrollment is less than 50% of the capacity for the school, and the school age and or condition of the facility is such that a recommendation is made to the Board of Education that the economics of rebuilding the school is not fiscally responsible or feasible, and or due to economies of scale, the level of services and quality of educational programming is diminished, and or health and safety issues are identified. So, if you have a facility that all of a sudden you discover has mold and the kids, or as, something that affects people's health, any number of things, right? Then obviously it doesn't make sense, well, we're going to go through the 3 years even though you're in a safety situation. No, that doesn't make sense. So when those kinds of things have been identified, the time for notice may be accelerated to a 1-year grace period if feasible. And those are for those unique situations. In all scenarios, as described above, existing language now, the board has final approval of any proposed reassignment of school and facilities. So, CRC might recommend something, staff may recommend something, but ultimately it's the board's decision. The superintendent will develop an administrative regulation to allow students attending a school subject to closure to have a priority to enroll in another school through the transfer process that is consistent with state law. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, Mr. Bernardo.
Good evening, board members. Currently in state law, there's really only 2 priorities in terms of kids who are going to transfer to another school, or actually enrolling within a school. And the first one is allowing for students who reside within the district. And there's also nuances with respect to military families as well. And then the second preference is students who previously attended the public school. And so we have an administrative regulation which has additional preferences that the district has decided upon. For example, if a teacher works at a certain school, there might be a priority for that teacher's students to attend the same school. And so we can develop priorities which will accommodate this particular policy, so that kids that are subject to a school that's closing will have a priority to transfer to another school if they so choose.
And this is where, again, transportation becomes important, right, of having access. So with that, I think we're ready to stand for questions, right?
Thank you very much. Opening it up for questions from the board. Vice President Anderson, you're up. I think my general comments or concerns are just like some language that feels like maybe it could be a little more clear, or things are a little bit subjective. For example, the word inefficient, the building being inefficient, like wanting to maybe define those things, not just for the public to have some reassurance about what that means, but also for future boards. And yeah, I think really just maybe some more clarity around the language. This is work that we do that I think we're all pretty familiar with, but if families go to look at the policy, I want it to be reassuring to them and not vague or confusing or uncertain, because that's not our goal. Our goal is to provide reassurance and make sure they know that the rug won't be pulled out from underneath them.
May I, Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So you've defined that word, or you have found that word. Are there others? Because we may think they're clear, but you may not. So can you identify other words that you think require looking at?
Can I have some time to read over it a few more times and send it to you in an email? I think it's a really solid start, and I don't think that there's a lot that needs to be changed. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, President Bose, Superintendent, members of the board. I just wanted to second that. I think there are a few things even that could just be switched around here to make it a little more clear. And there were a couple of things that I had identified when I read it and I didn't write down. And so President Bose, if maybe we could work together to just kind of identify a couple of places that maybe could be outlined a little more clearly, or some language that can move around that could maybe elucidate a couple of things. I work as a copywriter and copy editor during the day, so I'm happy to extend that to my volunteer work as well. I promise not to invoice the public schools. But yeah, I think I really appreciate this. I mean, I think when the board last considered closing schools, I think that probably all of us, I know that at the time, President Bose and board member Dr. Gonzalez were running for office, and I know we're at those meetings, and I know that at the time, board member Noble was very involved, so I think we all learned a lot from that process. I always bring this up, but I just want to say I was the only person at that meeting who didn't speak in favor of keeping the schools open. And I didn't speak in favor of closing the schools, but one of the things that I noted then that I want to note now is that my kids have attended large schools, and they have attended and do attend right now a very small school. The quality of education and the community at both schools was and is exceptional. And as I have told the NAVA PTA, and I've told board member Noble, the things that make NAVA exceptional absolutely have nothing to do with the size of the school. And so I think that it's critical that we look at that. I know that there are policy organizations that have said that small schools are better than larger schools, but I frankly disagree that small schools are, without question, better than larger schools. I do think one thing I will just say is that I don't necessarily think that class sizes are dependent on the size of the school, just because numbers shake out wildly. And like at Cesar Chavez, my kiddo had a class of 17, and at Nava, there are classes of 27. It just, it shakes out differently. And those are equity issues that I think we're always going to have unless we mandate that each class has 25 kids in it, no matter what. But there are obviously big equity issues with having a counselor at every school and having a nurse at every school and having a principal at every school, and a wide variety of services. One thing I would say that, and this will depend on the board, and we're not going to put this in the policy, but I do think it's important for the district to maintain a mix of school sizes. Like, not every school is the size of El Camino Real, and not every school is the size of Tesuque, and maybe no schools are, those sizes, but we just maintain a mix of schools that are smaller, but certainly not 50% of the capacity of their schools, and schools that are larger, because larger schools serve some kids better and smaller schools serve other kids better. So I think it's just, we don't want to be fighting with our facilities, but I do think it's a good idea to maintain school sizes. And I also just want to note for everyone here and for the superintendent that I think that this policy has to go hand in hand with recruitment and retention and with branding and marketing the schools. Because we had a lot of folks at that meeting who went to a school and said, I'm leaving the district if this school closes. And I think that was because folks didn't know what was available at schools like Cesar Chavez, what was available at schools like El Camino, what was available at schools like Sweeney. They just weren't aware of the magical things that are happening at other schools. And so I think that as we talk about the consolidation of schools in the future, that it just has to go hand in hand with us making sure that everybody knows that there are amazing schools. Gonzales is an amazing school. Aspen is an amazing school. El Dorado is an amazing school. We have a lot going on at a lot of different schools, and I don't think any of those things are tied to the size of the school. So I want to make sure people know that. I did want to ask a question about a scenario. Let's say that folks are zoned for, I'll use my kiddo's school as an example, just to not throw any other schools in there. But let's say that Nava is a school that's consolidated, and my kindergartner, let's say, will not be attending because we're phasing out grades. And then my fifth grader will have priority enrollment at another school, but the sibling won't necessarily have priority enrollment at that school if they're applying for the next year for interzone transfer. Does that make sense? So let's say that they're applying then for Atalaya, and my older child gets in because they have priority enrollment, but my younger child doesn't get in because they don't have priority enrollment.
Vice President Anderson, as I understand it, when that phase happens, your fifth grader would finish school there because it's not happening immediately.
Right. Okay.
So,
But on that point, Madam President, Mr. President, and board president, and members of the board, you still have a sibling rule, I believe, on transfers. So let's say the kindergartner didn't go, and you want the fifth grader to be with the kindergartner and move to a new school, then the sibling, which we already have that as a preference in the transfer policy, would take care of that.
Okay. That, I tied my brain in knots thinking of that scenario. It just popped into my head. And I think that was my only question. I have this like poll, which is, I get scared a little bit when we use numbers and like specific scenarios, because I think, what about, things that we don't think about. But I appreciate that, lines 24 and 25, the board has final approval of proposed reassignment. However, there are clear guidelines about what to do so that parents can know and community members can know this is what we're considering when we look at the consideration of the consolidation or closure of a school. So I just want to say thank you to everyone involved for bringing this out. I mean, this is like an amazing thing to come out of the reimagining process. It is timely and important, so thank you very much.
You bet.
Any other questions, concerns, or feedback? All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
So,
Can I move approval of the first
yes.
reading?
Yes.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the first reading of this lovely amended policy 534, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you.
So just to follow up, this will be coming back in 2 weeks. So we'll email you, see if you guys can give us some language, and then we'll take a look at it and try to get it back to you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too, Dr. Garcia. All right. Next on our board discussion and possible action is our board retreat discussion, which we typically do in September, I think, or end of August. So if we can look at some dates, I think in the past we've both met on Saturday mornings and weekday evenings. So if there's a preference for a day or time, please chime up. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I know that it's harder because we all work. I know Dr. Gonzalez is retired, but I also know she probably works more hours a week than the rest of us. It is difficult for me to secure childcare on Saturday mornings, so if we could do even Saturday afternoons or after work, that would be really fantastic. I don't mean to put us all around my schedule, but no, sorry.
That's valuable. That's fine. Fine for me.
Any other preferences? You can think about it, email me, and then we can work individually to try to secure a location, date and time. As Board President Bozay mentioned, we've had them on weekends. We've also had them after work on the weekdays. So whatever you guys prefer, please let me know.
Madam President.
Yes, Dr. Gonzalez.
Members of the board, I will be out of town from September 9th through the 23rd. So those are 2 Saturdays.
Okay.
Or 3 Saturdays. I think we don't meet. Yes.
All right. Well, we will definitely do it before or after that. We want you to be there. All right.
So given that, I would suggest we look at the last week of September, not before,
Okay.
which is the week of Labor Day, and that's like tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. The month of August goes by very quickly with the start of school, and then there's a week left at the beginning of September, so that makes sense, maybe the end of September.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Could I suggest that we set a date now, since we're all here, and that way you don't have to go through a million emails with us? I just want to note that I know that we have a CRC meeting on Wednesday, and I have a meeting on Wednesday. I am otherwise completely available. We're talking about the week of the 18th or the next week after that?
She's not back until the 23rd.
The week of the 25th, with the Saturday being September
Said the
30th.
last. Yeah, of course you said the last, and I don't know how to count. I can't do Wednesday. We have a Thursday meeting that week. But otherwise, I'm available.
Maybe the 25th, the Saturday afternoon?
You mean the
30th
The 30th.
September.
30th.
I'm not here on the 30th.
Okay.
We can even do Friday after work. I know that would be back-to-back evening meetings.
It is Sukkot. I don't know if that matters.
Or push it a week into the first week of October.
Or, I mean, Saturday the 23rd, if you're back. I'm back. Does that work for?
You will be available on the 23rd? Let's go for that.
Okay.
Afternoon,
Afternoon.
September 23rd.
What time is agreeable to you?
2:30, if that's okay. Is that too late?
No,
Okay.
that's afternoon.
What time was that?
2:30?
To what time?
2:45.
Till we're done.
I have something that evening.
What time? I mean, like, okay, so 5 o'clock. Yeah, 4:35. Yeah, that's plenty of time.
I know this is really exciting for everyone watching on YouTube.
All righty.
Good call, though.
Thank you.
Just get it scheduled before we have more plans. All right, Saturday, September 23rd at 2:30, and we will work on the location. All right, thank you all very much. Next is our school year 2023-2024 board committee appointments. First, we have the audit committee appointments to make. You will notice on your cover sheet that everything is listed as vacant because we haven't nominated and confirmed anyone yet. So if you have current members that are on there that are agreeable to continuing, feel free to name them. We can make a motion and get them on there. I have not heard back from my audit committee appointee yet, so I don't have anybody for the audit committee at this time. I hope she will continue. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I also haven't heard back from my audit committee appointee, but I actually imagine that she'll want to continue because she's been an absolute rock star on the audit committee.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so I'll leave that vacant for now, but just to note that I'll likely have an appointee at the next meeting.
Great. Anyone else?
I don't have mine yet.
Okay. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Superintendent, when is our first audit committee meeting? The interns? Yeah. Yeah. Is it before our next board meeting?
Next week.
It's next week. This is the 16th, I think.
Thursday the 16th it's scheduled. So, yeah.
So even if you and I appoint our members, we won't have a quorum of the audit committee, so we won't be able to do
Well, it
anything.
sort of depends on your definition of a quorum, but I don't know if it's half of the number of slots or half of the number of appointed members.
Mr. Granada.
The lawyer knows.
So we'll work on that and get back to you guys because that's why I walked over there. We have our first audit meeting. I think it's the 16th or 17th, next Thursday.
Yeah.
And that was also our entrance meeting for our audit.
Yeah.
So we'll look into that, get back to you because we need to find out what the quorum definition is.
And if sitting members, if we haven't appointed, if sitting members could continue or something like that, but we could provisionally, I think your appointee and yours have both indicated their intent. I'm now chairing this committee, so has now indicated their intent to attend. So that's good.
Right. Okay. so let's say that,
And I have failed to find a new member. I need a new member in case anybody has, in your, trolling for folks out there, has turned up people who would desire this one. I have a couple ideas, but yeah, this one snuck up fast.
okay, so do we need to take official action to say that our sitting members, if they show up at the meeting next week, they're good to go?
Well, Board President Bozay just confirmed with legal counsel and also our CFO, Mr. Robert Martinez, even if we don't have a quorum, the entrance is not an action item, so we can still discuss it. So even if we have just the board members, myself, Mr. Martinez, we can proceed with that, and I think that's the most important piece of next week's meeting.
Okay, great. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, President Bozay. If our members who have indicated that they would like to continue on the committee, are they able to attend?
I would suggest making that appointment now, and then if they decide not to be part of the committee, then we can come back in 2 weeks.
So I'm going to move, or I'm going to appoint my member now, and then if we need to change, then we can have so I'd like to, is it a motion to appoint Denise Rapman to vacancy and everyone else? No, sorry.
Sorry, I think one motion with all of the names.
Got it.
So Carmen's got one too, I think.
Okay, great. Okay, so
we have a motion to appoint Denise Rapman, Cynthia Sandoval, Dr. Gonzalez, who's your?
Margot Shirley.
Margot Shirley. Okay. So those three, we hope will continue. We'll go ahead and make that motion. If I can have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of appointing those members to the audit committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Fingers crossed they're agreeable, because they've been great assets to that committee.
They really have, and I just want to say to all the outgoing members, thank you, and to all the members who we just reappointed that I really hope that they will stay. They have been great.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I just got confirmation that Denise wants to stay on.
Yay!
So.
And it really, for all of our committees, it's nice to have people continue for more than one term, because that builds knowledge upon knowledge. And it's a lot to learn in 1 year, so we get to keep learning, and it's nice when that can happen with some continuity. All right, on to CRC. We did have Dr. Gonzalez's appointees from last meeting. We did have Board Member Noble's appointee of April Gallegos, and we did have Vice President Anderson's appointee, Hannah Patrick, to continue as well. Everyone else has vacancies. I first would like to say thank you, much gratitude to John Morrison, who's been on CRC for many, many years and decided to step down, and we had a nice chat about that this week, and I really appreciate him and his service to the committee. I do have new appointees and had a really robust response yesterday when I posted on my Board of Education page on Facebook that lots of people were very interested, and I ended the day feeling so excited and so hopeful that people in the community want to be involved and help where they can. So I have my appointees, and I shared some other interested parties with the superintendent. So if you need them, he has some names, and you can reach out to people on your own. So my appointees to the CRC for 2023-2024 are Liz Elmquist and Kristen Pels. Does anyone else have anyone else to appoint to the CRC at this time? All right, I will make a motion then to appoint Liz Elmquist and Kristen Pels to the CRC for this coming year.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who showed interest and excitement. These are two wonderful parents of young children dedicated to public schools and public education, and very interested and passionate about contributing and keeping an eye on equity as always. Next, we are on to our action item, and that starts with the IDEA-B application. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. Taking us through a brief summary, annual application of our IDEA-B entitlement is our Executive Director of Special Education, Mr. Jeff Pinkerton.
Good evening, Madam Board President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. I remember this time last year standing up here thinking, oh my goodness, this IDEA-B, the whole federal thing, I was freaked out. So I understand it now. It's so much different. But basically the funding is the same. We've received about the same funding that we did last year. For this coming school year, $3,589,603.79, and the preschool budget $53,681.77. It has been approved by the PED and has already completely approved. We need to upload the document. Once you guys approve that, we will send it on to them and show that it was on the board minutes, and this is complete. So it's interesting how it comes before, but the approval, but that's apparently the way it's done in many, many years. So do you have any questions on the federal IDEA grant?
Thank you very much. Questions from the board? I'll move approval. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next is the Resolution 2023-2024-2, Santa Fe Public Schools Board of Education and Pojoaque Valley School District Board of Education boundary. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. We were contacted by our Santa Fe County Clerk in regards to a potential misalignment in our boundaries between Santa Fe Public Schools and Pojoaque Valley Schools. We'll be bringing forward a resolution at an upcoming meeting, but with us tonight to talk about some of the work that's gone into it is Megan Munoz. She represents the Ortiz Zamora law firm, and she'll kind of give us an understanding, brief description and walk us through some of the potential misalignments of boundaries.
Thank you, Superintendent. Welcome, Ms. Munoz.
Just a quick question. There's no resolution. Okay. Coming.
Yep. We're working with Pojoaque Valley Schools.
There's no papers. Resolution to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm happy to join you tonight. As Superintendent Chavez said, I have been working on this issue with Josh for, I think, almost a year. Pojoaque was just brought into it, so Member Noble, to address your concern about a resolution. We will have one for you, but we have to meet with Pojoaque before and construct that resolution together before we can bring that in front of you. So that is forthcoming, and probably you can anticipate that in next month in September at some point. To give you an overview of the boundary issues, there are 3 points of, so if you're familiar with we're not projecting the maps, but probably when we bring the resolution, I'll give you a better view. But if you can imagine in your mind the district boundary that Pojoaque and Santa Fe share, there are 3 areas of concern from the county clerk that we're working with Pojoaque to address. One of those areas is we don't have a certain the boundaries aren't touching, I guess. So there should be a continuous boundary from Santa Fe, and then Powaque's district should start. There's a gap in 2 areas, and then there's another area that actually overlaps between both districts. So the issue presented, or the circumstances, is that this needs to be dealt with in cooperation with both districts. So Josh and I have initiated the conversation with Powaque, and that will be how we move it forward. The next step will be having a discussion with their district, and then we will hopefully come to terms working with Superintendent Chavez and bring forward a resolution that will match in both districts. So their board will pass a resolution. You as the board will pass a resolution, and then that resolution will be shared with the county clerk to clear up any discrepancies. And I can stand for questions, or if Josh, you want to add.
And if I may add just a couple of things. The discrepancy between the boundaries really only affects like a handful of students. Some of the students we probably already are serving that may be Powaque students. And the issue that we need to really resolve is just kind of a money issue, you know. Which school should receive the SEG for those students? And then on the other side, you know, which families should pay taxes to certain districts? You know, we're going to, for like the GeoBond and ETN and different funding sources like that. And also I consulted with the research and polling group that we just worked with for redistricting, and this issue doesn't affect the redistricting that we just passed recently. It's just a matter of cleaning up these boundaries. It's really an issue more for the county clerk than for the schools, but we do need to kind of clean it up a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Granado. You answered a couple of my questions. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, President Bose. What happens to the kids who are maybe in Powaque's district but are going to Santa Fe Public Schools now?
Vice President Anderson, that's something we had a discussion with others, including the county. We're currently, the boundaries and the access to the area in dispute can be accessed easily by Santa Fe Public Schools and our transportation routes, where Powaque potentially would have to come into Santa Fe, come back up, pick up those kids, and the transportation would be much longer. It's also no access to that area. So for us, right now we're serving those students, again, a handful, very small number of students, but we're providing them the opportunity to receive an education through Santa Fe Public Schools because it's easier access to develop transportation routes.
Great. And do we receive funding for students who transfer out of our district, out of another district into our district?
Well, that's part of what we're going to go through with this resolution, right? Just to clean up the boundaries. Our boundaries for years, and I know we had Deputy Superintendent Wagner look at this as well, has been how it reads. And Powaque as well. It came from the county clerk that they spotted some kind of discrepancy in their records. So for us, many, many years ago, we have those boundaries. It shows on a lot of our documentation. And so for us, it's really about following what has been in place for since the start of the school district.
Got it. That makes total sense. Thank you so much.
Yes, Board Member Noble.
So just in part to answer the question, we're funded on the previous year's enrollment. So yes, we get funded for the kids who attend our schools. And I hope that we talk to the families there because, again, like displacing families because, and it sounds like I was going to ask whose maps we're talking about. It sounds like we're talking about the county clerk's maps because we just did the map exercise. And yeah, I guess I get it for property tax rolls or something, but this is strange. Thank you.
Yes.
Board President Bose and Board Member Noble, board members. I don't think it's going to actually affect any of the kids in terms of where they're going to school. We're not going to just surprise kids and say, oh, hey, you guys need to go to Pewaukee, or you're, vice versa, you're going to come to Santa Fe. I think it's just, I think we already serve most of those kids who, if they should be going to Pewaukee and they have been coming to Santa Fe, it's easier for them to come to Santa Fe. And so just making it, I guess, making the maps represent that fact.
Okay.
And just to say, partly because I get pedantic sometimes, but we don't have to pass any resolution. Like, we don't. There's no way. I mean, we probably will. We want to be good partners with Pewaukee and our county clerk and that sort of thing. But I just going to push back on the presumption that the board passes anything.
If I could just add that we are actually, part of the consultation with Pewaukee is looking at the families, and most of the areas that we're looking at in question are actually very close to tribal communities. And so there may be some tribal consultation that also has to take place in consultation with those families and how they're affected. But as Superintendent Chavez said, it's more about bus routes, and the maps that we have from PED don't necessarily account for road construction, natural landscaping, and things like that. And so, Member Noble, you're absolutely correct. It is the county clerk's maps that we're looking at that are at issue.
Thank you. I think that's all for now.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month.
Yes, thanks.
All right. We have first reading of amended policy 405, special education services.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. Again, with us tonight is our Executive Director of Exceptional Student Services. I think I said Executive Director of Special Education, so looked at the cover sheet. Taking us through what we needed to add as far as amending Board Policy 405. Mr. Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam President, board members, and Superintendent Chavez. This is also part of the IDEA funding that we just talked about. There's been some lack of clarity for quite some time about how we use our proportionate share, and what we use that proportionate share is to provide services to any student in Santa Fe area that attend private schools. And oftentimes there will be requests, especially for evaluations. And so this policy, there was so much gray area and has been for a long time. So this brought clarity from PED. We've been working with them on clarity on this policy, what we're obligated to do, what we could use the proportionate share for through the child find process. And this policy 405 is just to give some clarity. We already have the policy in place. This is just to add a little bit of verbiage to make the policy more clear as it goes forward.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much. This might not even apply to like what you're putting forward in front of us, but it's just a question I have about, our money going to private schools for students with disabilities. So private schools don't have to recognize IEPs or necessarily put in place accommodations or services for students with disabilities, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if they're not providing services, do we still provide a proportionate share of our IDEAB? Okay.
We're required to do that.
We're required to do that. Who do I talk to get that? No, I'm just kidding. Not you, I know.
No, but we're on the same page.
Yeah,
This
okay.
has been an issue.
All right, got it. That's good to know. Thank you.
Right. Anyone else?
Yes, Dr. Gonzalez.
Madam President, members of the board, do we have a large portion of private school students that receive this funding or are going to receive this funding?
It has always been somewhat low in numbers coming out of the pandemic, and this is what created this addition, there's a tremendous amount of requests for evaluation. And so many of the private schools, because their whole agenda is different, they wanted an evaluation from the district every year. And they were using that for progress monitoring rather than a true evaluation of where the student was. And so that created such a heavy load to our process as well. So yes, to answer the question, there's more coming in because so many more are requesting evaluations from the private schools. I will say most of the ones that do request the evaluation, we go through the process, 9 out of 10 times they don't qualify. That's interesting.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I'll just recommend that we just had an amazing private neuropsychologist evaluate our child, and our insurance paid for it rather than the school district. So I'm just throwing that out there as an option for anyone.
That's awesome.
Just saying.
There's a lot of parents that if they have that available, they do use that.
Yeah, and I understand.
It's very helpful to the flow with the new law that passed and the tremendous pressure on diagnostics for everyone in Santa Fe.
Yeah, and I know there's tremendous pressure, particularly on our district for diagnosticians.
Yes.
And I know they're hard to find, so it's just a concern that is not your responsibility that, our public funds go towards that, so.
All right, I have, I think, just 2 questions right now. In that first sentence on line 21, has an obligation to locate and evaluate students with disabilities enrolled by their parents in private schools located within the district boundaries. How do you, it sounds like a lot of times it comes from the private school. Do we have an obligation beyond that to find those students?
What usually happens, we have a person, and most of our proportionate share is one person that we dedicate funds for that proportionate share. And she's the liaison between our private schools and our department. And then what she does is usually the private school will give her name, and she works with them to provide them the information and that's called the child find process. We do not go out and reach out to, there's a child find, like the little ones, they go through the regular child find, whether they go to private school or public school. So that system is already in place. As they get older, it's usually just a word of mouth or something like that.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to understand how that works in the real world. And then on line 33, when it says obligated to engage in a timely and meaningful consultation, what is timely considered?
As of July 1st, the PED passed a law that we have 60-day timeline. And this is, to be very honest with you, it's put everyone in the state in a panic because whereas we've been 6 to 8 months behind in evaluations coming out of COVID, it's only advancing the number of people because that law allows you to go or bypass the SAP process. So you can go straight without gathering any information or any data or anything. A parent can say, I want this evaluation, I want it done right now. You have 60 days from the time that parent, and it could be any licensed professional, an EA in a school is licensed. So if a parent is at a baseball game and says, hey, I want my child tested, that is considered, that's when the timeline starts. It's very, we've had attorneys come in. We had a presentation this last week from our attorneys from Walsh Gallegos to try to help us to understand how it's so complex, and we're working very much. We're working on policies to hand to principals, to hand to staff, and referral process. So we're working on it. But everyone, it's not just us, it's everyone. But we're working. We have some really good diagnosticians and working on the process to to really streamline it. We have a queue system now to where that it goes in, we start the timeline, we know exactly when that's due. So.
All right. Hopefully everyone's on their toes at baseball games. Chief?
I know, right?
Yes, Dr. Gonzalez.
President Bose, members of the committee, it seems wrong to give money to private schools when they're not doing IEPs and not really showing how they're using that money to help that child.
I would agree with you 100%. We have a prime example. We had a parent that their child goes to private online school in Georgia, and we got a request this week. She demands the 60-day timeline, and she wants her child evaluated. We have to, by law, we're obligated because they live in Santa Fe, even though they go to Georgia school, we have to provide that evaluation, and we have to do it right now. So I know that as a board member, your heads are exploding right now, but yeah.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you, Board President Noble. Does this include religious schools?
It does.
Yeah, okay.
Any child in Santa Fe County, or within our Santa Fe boundaries, yes.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, I move approval of the first reading of amended policy 405, special education services.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We don't like it, but, you know, have to follow the law. All right, so we have first reading of amended policy 330, discrimination and harassment of students, or students dash students.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Bose, members of the board, audience members. Walking us through an amendment of Board Policy 330 will be our legal counsel, Mr. Josh Granata. Again, this is just cleaning up, providing clarity, making sure that we're in compliance with state and federal advice and law, and you'll see all the changes that come in under the red edits. So, Mr. Granata.
Board member, President Bose, board members, this policy is being proposed to be amended based off of our interactions with the Office for Civil Rights, the federal office. There was a complaint filed against the school district last school year. In my opinion and the district's opinion, the complaint lacked merit, but nevertheless, once the complaint was filed with the Office for Civil Rights, it's kind of hard to get out of it. And so as part of the resolution to settle the complaint, we agreed to amend one of our policies, and this is the policy that we're proposing to amend. Essentially, the OCR wanted for us to make clear what retaliation means, and ironically enough, it means different things according to which law you look at. We already had a definition of retaliation within this policy on page 4, which it has been removed and replaced on page 1 with the red language for retaliation. Under Title II, Title VII, Title IX, Section 504, they all have different definitions of what retaliation means. I tried to synthesize all those definitions here and kind of condense it into language that's not so legalese that people can understand, but at the same time would pass muster with the Office for Civil Rights. They have approved this policy in terms of settling the complaint. And so there's a definition of retaliation in here. There is a link to our other policies with respect to how an employee would file a complaint within the district. And so if an employee wants to allege that there's been retaliation at a school site, for example, we have forms and other policies which would allow for that to happen. And so on page 2 towards the bottom, it directs the employee to AR 218 and AR 220, which have the complaint process, like an internal complaint process. The Office of Civil Rights wants to make it clear that an employee doesn't even have to follow our internal processes. They could simply bypass all kind of internal complaint processes and go straight to the Office for Civil Rights, and that's allowed under federal law. And so on page 3, I added the address, the contact information for the Office for Civil Rights if the employee wants to go straight to the Office for Civil Rights. And on the last 2 pages, I included the contact information for our Title IX coordinator, which is Crystal Ibata, and also our 504 coordinator, Sue O'Brien. And we have both of those individuals already available on the website, and it's indicated in this policy that we're going to make sure that those individuals' names are on the website so people can contact, the Section 504 coordinator or the Title IX coordinator. And so I'd ask that the board approves the policy for the first reading. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, Board President Bose. So just to be clear, a policy 330 is within a student heading, right? What are the 300s?
That's correct.
I tried to look on my phone and it didn't work.
That's correct. It is for students. However, parents or employees can allege that there's retaliation against the students.
Okay. So line 88 through 90 on page 2, the addition there is that of the employee who has experienced that? Yeah. Not the student?
It's not clear. It is.
Okay.
Yes, you're correct, but this was part of the settlement and the agreement that we needed to include just to provide clarity and definition between students and employees.
Okay. My only concern is just that it seems to apply to the employee but is housed within a student board policy. It seems like a little messy. Which is not your fault, and I understand that it's part of the settlement. I just to flag that. And then one other thing, this is so pedantic. The first line, discrimination against makes sense, but then harassment against doesn't make sense. So I don't know if we can move harassment first and then to say discrimination of, or say harassment and retaliation against, discrimination and retaliation against or harassment of any student. Do you see what I'm saying there? That it doesn't agree?
That makes sense to me.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And to address your first point, I can add the word student with employee so that it does affect students.
Okay.
And then I think it would be good to post the same policy under the employee portion of our policies. Because I think what your concern is, Vice President Anderson, it's going to sit under the 300s with the students and to maybe post it twice.
Yeah,
right?
I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading it that employees get involved because they can file a complaint on behalf of the students.
It's on behalf.
On behalf.
Yes. Okay, I misunderstood that. So it's on behalf of the student, not an employee on behalf of the employee.
And then we want to make sure that the employees are not getting retaliated against for filing on behalf of the students.
On behalf of the students. Okay.
Is that right?
That's right.
That makes total sense to me. I misunderstood.
The wording isn't super clear, but that's how I understand
it. Yeah, if we add that, Mr. Granada, that makes a lot of sense. Or student, would make a lot of sense. Thank you.
Got it.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, can I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the first reading of amended policy 330, discrimination and harassment of students, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. second reading and adoption of amended policy 423, district wellness, which means some of my favorite people get to talk next. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. Taking us through the second reading of amended policy 423, district wellness. A couple of very important, great individuals to our school district. And I don't know if you caught it last time, but their titles changed. And so, again, I want to just thank Executive Director Sue O'Brien of Student Wellness. That is her new title. And I'm going to forget your title, Jen, but
Assistant Director.
Assistant Director. So again, they've been committed to the district, to the department, and the work they produce and perform is outstanding. So I want to thank you both. And please proceed.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. Good evening, Board President Bozay, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, Cabinet, and audience. Jen Jefferson and I are here this evening for the second reading of our wellness policy. We're seeking your approval really to repeal and replace the existing wellness policy. We had so many changes that, if you recall, we decided to go toward repealing and replacing what already existed, Board Policy 423. And mainly it's about making sure that we're in alignment with the New Mexico Public Education Department, their guidance on wellness policies. They put out an implementation guidance document, so it's really us getting in alignment with that, as well as putting forth the recommendations that came out of our School Health Advisory Council, which is the SHAC. So after careful review of the first draft, as well as consideration given to the board comments at our last board meeting, the only change that we see needing to be made at this point is really coming from line 106, which reads, community members will be provided access to the district's outdoor physical activity facilities as available. And what we are proposing that gets added is per Santa Fe Public Schools facility use application guideline. Other than that, we made a careful decision to keep the rest of the policy the same, mainly because relative to the professional development and integrating that professional development into the policy, the guidelines tell us, the PED guidelines tell us it has to actually be in the policy. That language has to exist in the policy. So we felt pretty obligated to keep that in. And then also, I know we were trying to address looking at creating administrative regulation instead of putting this very specific language in about professional development, because we don't do it in necessarily all the policies. But because the PED requires it in our policy, we really felt that it didn't make sense to do an AR. And that's why the policy itself is long, and it's full of a lot of content. And again, it's really about getting in alignment with what we're required to do. The other comment that we wanted to address was around the vetting and approving of curriculum and programs through the Office of Student Wellness. So this is a practice that we've had in place for a while now. And I think it's really important to share our reasoning around really wanting to keep this language in the policy. We want to make sure, and it's based on previous experience and a desire to deliver high-quality programs that are trauma-informed and that our students get curriculum and programs that are delivered by people that have experience, by people have a high degree of knowledge in that area, and also that that what we're being asked to actually put in our school is logistically possible, that we're not being asked to do things or the schools that we just can't do. So we really feel that vetting the process, and I do have a copy of that, it's actually available for you, to ensure that we're implementing evidence-based programs and curriculum and best practices, like I said, with trained facilitators that are trauma-informed, and that makes sense for our schools. It's nowhere intended, or in no way intended to be limiting for our schools. And so with that, we really feel like we would like to continue that God bless you, that practice. And at this time, we stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Yes, Board Member Noble.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the adjustments. I appreciate this policy. I think it does sort of strengthen one of the number one things that we've been looking at and hearing is needed in terms of supporting overall wellness, particularly social, emotional, behavioral wellness in our students. So I think it's great, and it is meaty. There's a lot here. So I do have a few questions. Well, first of all, a sort of general question, which is, there's a lot of activities in here, educating children, families, and staff about food allergies, offering information to families, encouraging them to teach their children about physical activity, lots and lots of things. Do we need additional staff to do the things that are in here?
Board President Bozay, Member Noble, I don't think so at this point. I think that the schools, I mean, I would maybe need to seek, feedback from other folks within the district or perhaps the principals. But I believe, with our encouraging families to walk to school and doing daily activities, I don't see that as something that we're going to need extra staff for.
Have we talked with folks who are, I don't know, maybe this is sort of a how long is a piece of string question, but have we talked with folks who are already involved on these sort of additional activities and whether it can be rolled in? Have we had feedback basically from our school sites?
I apologize. Jen whispered to me and I missed part of that. Board Member Noble, could you please repeat?
Oh, I'm just wondering if we've had feedback from the folks who, given what you say, if we've had anybody at school sites look at this and sort of weigh in as to whether they can roll it into their daily activities, if we've had feedback from the folks on school sites who will be doing this stuff.
We had members of, different members of our school community on the School Health Advisory Council, but we did not, and Anita Het was part of that, of course, at the time, but we didn't take this out to school sites and ask them specifically about like an activity such as this.
Okay, but you did have folks on the advisory council who've been at school sites doing stuff.
Yes.
Thank you. On page 4, it's line 196, it says all students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade will receive an approved bullying prevention curriculum. Is that new? Do they already?
Board Member Noble, they already receive bullying prevention, which is part of our second step social emotional learning curriculum.
Great. Thank you. Same page, line 176, all students shall have access to layer 1, 2, and 3 academic, behavioral, and social emotional interventions. Can you tell me what that means?
Sure.
I guess it's the different layers.
Yeah. So what this is in reference to is called the multi-layered system of support. We used to call it MTSS here in our district and led that charge for a couple of years, and the state now refers it to multi-layer system of support. And all that really means is that we're calling out the fact that all of our students would have access to interventions, whether it's through because of academic needs, social emotional needs, or behavioral needs. And there are different layers, we used to call them tiers, when there's an identified need, what that support or service would look like. Again, it could be academic. So there are different layered systems of support, different interventions that could be put in place to help a student in those areas. And that's something we already do.
Okay, and it's defined in the multi-layered systems of support, which is obviously a proper name.
Correct.
Kind of thing. And is 3 the most intensive?
Yes.
And are we going above and beyond what is required by state and federal law in doing this, or is this also sort of like special ed requirements in state and federal law?
Board Member Noble, when the state put out their guidance around MLSS, it was really clear in a change from years past where students would be, I don't want to say stuck, but they would be in different tiers. The real focus around MLSS now is that it's more fluid. So students can, any student, even students in special education, currently receiving special education services, could actually have access to these interventions. So to answer your question, I don't believe we are going above and beyond. I think that we are meeting the requirements.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all. Just going through, and again, I really appreciate the strength of this policy and what it ultimately underlines. On the line that you identified, 106, community members will be provided access to the district's outdoor physical activity facilities as available, and then the proposal is to add per Santa Fe Public Schools facility use application guidelines there, which I think is important, and I think a lot of us have been talking to folks about joint facility use and fields, and this is a whole kettle of fish, so to speak. And personally, I would like to see us have really robust agreements, probably with our city partners, to use our facilities better for the public generally, given that they are publicly funded. However, this district is not funded for Parks and Rec, so the city is. I do appreciate that we can, I think, it's an and both. We need to move on this and do our best for the community, but we also do need to maintain that ability per our application guidelines, given that the school district is not funded to provide general parks and recreation to the community, so I appreciate that. I had one other change I'd like to suggest, if it is amenable to the superintendent and the wellness team. This is on line 169, page 4 of 6. Every school shall maintain a school wellness team that meets weekly to look at the school climate. Always being a little bit wary of a very specific requirement, I would just suggest that we change the word weekly to regularly, because weekly is definitely weekly, and regularly could be slightly less than weekly.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. Executive Director O'Brien, do you agree?
Yes.
And I think you're spot on with that, Board Member Noble, because we have a lot going on. Adding one more thing to a weekly assignment may be overbearing and overwhelming for our educators.
I would ask, I think that in our evaluation of, that seems like a harsh word, but certainly when we're looking at the wellness teams and how well they're functioning at different schools, that I just don't want it to go too far in the sense that they don't meet and it doesn't get done, what typically should get done in a wellness team meeting. So I think regularly says there shouldn't really be pause, but it doesn't really tie it to once a week.
Regularly and on a consistent basis.
Right, regularly is.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that all for you, Board Member?
That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. While you were speaking about, do we have the resources to do all of this education that I think we all agree is really important, but we want to make sure we have the resources to do that. I wondered if there was a way to maybe build some of that into the Friday newsletters that the superintendent sends out, like First Friday Wellness. And I think everyone has gotten in the habit of reading those. I know I look forward to them, and it's fun to have a little juicy tidbit of health education. So maybe that would be something that you guys could do to ease the burden a little bit.
Thank you.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, President Bose. I'm just so excited about this. The work that went into it is very just abundantly clear, and I really appreciate it. And I just have a few questions. Lines 99 through 101 on PBIS. How are the staff currently trained in positive behavior intervention and supports? Are they? Or?
I don't know if you want to speak about that a little bit, or I guess I can. Sure. Okay, sure. I think that currently we have a cohort of principals that I'm actually working with on PBIS and creating safe and civil schools, and it's something that they are volunteering to do. I think that a lot of the principals currently have a strong knowledge of PBIS, and that it's the strategies or the, I want to say like the interventions, the structures that exist in the school are going to be different from different schools, school to school. So where one school might have PACS, which is, you know, a framework or a strategy structure framework under PBIS. But in terms of training them on a regular basis, I don't do that piece. We work a lot with them on behavior. That's what we've been doing a lot on, training them on classroom management around the behavioral aspect of PBIS, and really creating the structures. But I believe the associate superintendents work with their site principals on making sure that they have these positive behavior intervention supports in place.
Got it. So it can look really different from school to school.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. I'm very familiar with PACS Quiet.
Right. Quiet hands. But I think that's safe to say.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
And then line 127 through 128. So the exempted parts of the curriculum are the parts that the parents opt out of. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And who develops the alternative lessons? Is that done at the school site, or do you have alternative lessons? And do they hit the same standards as the parts that are the folks are opting out of? Was that question clear?
Not particularly.
Okay.
What we do know, because this actually, the guidance for the alternative lessons for the exempted parts of the curriculum, you'll see is an addition in this policy. So we actually recognize that we need to do work on possibly coming up with these alternatives, because right now it looks like it's at the site level what that would look like. How would we actually, what would those alternative lessons look like?
Okay.
So I'm not clear about that right now.
Okay, got it. That is helpful.
And I just want to add, we'll work on that. That way we don't put the burden on the school staff.
Okay,
Yep.
great. That's fantastic. My kids are not opting out, but that's good to know. And then I just wanted to provide kudos for lines 184 through 192. I've had a lot of discussions with professionals about how difficult prevention work is and how much of a science prevention work is, and how Scared Straight, or the kind of DARE that we had when we were younger, is not necessarily always the best implementation of prevention. And so, you know, as we dial into the science of prevention, I think it's critical that that's what we're using in the schools, rather than a hodgepodge of various, you know, things. So I just really appreciate this, and I know that we are in an epidemic of great proportion when it comes to things like substance use or gun violence, or things that we can prevent as a school system, even though we're not necessarily tasked with that in education, but, you know, we become the catch-all for doing all of the things in all of the places, so I really appreciate that. Lines 207 through 209 on page 5. Superintendent, I just wanted to follow up on something that we had a conversation about, and I just was unclear about. referring them to community-based agencies for comprehensive clinical assessments when deemed necessary. We had a conversation about folks like following up and walking people through that process, and I couldn't remember if that was what was, and you know this, I'm sure, if that was what was funded by the grant written through La Familia, or if that's like something totally different. Okay.
Yeah, Vice President Anderson, it's something different. We're going to pilot that project. We haven't officially announced it.
Okay.
But it's with Care Solis, and they're the ones that are going to bridge that gap between, if I remember correctly to your point, whenever we make a referral for health services in general, we'll hand that off so they can walk them through, work out the insurance, make sure the appointments are made, touching base every single day until the appointment is executed, and then they provide feedback to us whether or not the individual was seen.
I love it. That is so fantastic. Okay, yeah, that's it. And then that's it.
And if
That's
I
all.
can add, Vice President Anderson, members of the board, and superintendent, specifically in this paragraph 204 down to 209, it's actually referring specifically to when there's suicide ideation or expression of suicide. So what Superintendent Chavez added is a very exciting opportunity that we have for overall referrals in behavioral health, and is really important and hopefully going to fill some gaps that we have. But we currently do have a strong suicide protocol in place, and we currently have a method to refer them for same-day suicide assessment specifically, which is a clinical assessment. Our school counselors, our school nurses, they do an initial assessment on an evidence-based screener to really determine, do they need a full assessment? But based on the role of a school counselor and that role, their limitations is not to do a clinical assessment, so we refer out for a full clinical assessment in regards to suicide.
Okay, that makes sense.
And when we make that announcement about our partnership, just want to make it very clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Executive Director O'Brien, it not only helps the student access healthcare needs and appointments, anyone who lives in that household will also be able to participate in this program. So, many of you guys are parents. They will help you as well make appointments, follow throughs, and walk you through the insurance gamut. The other part is they also have over 50 languages, so be able to include others that may not speak English.
Okay, that's great. That's really exciting. Thank you so much for this policy. This is really great. Yes, Board Member Noble.
I'll go ahead and move approval with the language changes discussed on lines 106 and 169.
I will second. All in favor of approving the second reading of amended policy 423, district wellness, with the noted changes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you both so much, and your teams for this wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we have second reading and adoption of amended policy 118, committees of the board, which I looked for online last night and couldn't find because it was here. So I'll look for it next week online.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. Again, we want to first apologize because the policy that we brought forward for first read did not have something very important. When you make an appointment, one of the two within CRC should be within your district. So this is the current one, this is the correct one, and Mr. Granada, do you want to walk us through this, please?
President Bozay, members of the board, as Superintendent Chavez noted, the change that was actually noted last board meeting by Board Member Noble is in this policy. Let's see, on page 2, under the Community Review Committee, line 62, each board member shall appoint at least one member who resides within their representative elective district. The other appointment may be at large. The CRC shall have co-chairs. One board member shall be appointed by the board and one community member selected by the CRC. And then the agenda will be developed by the co-chairs in collaboration with the superintendent or the designee. All the other changes were in the policy that was brought to you last time we met, and so I'll stand for any questions from the board.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, I move approval of the second reading of amended policy 118, committees of the board. Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you. And I just want to add, now that it's approved, we'll get this out to Audit Committee and CRC.
Great.
And if I may, just, there wasn't a chance for additional discussion there. I want to say thank you to both the Audit Committee and particularly the outgoing chairs. I think we got a little ahead of ourselves and that we appointed new chairs without having done the second reading at the last time, but that's all right. But both committees worked very hard, and this does clean up some of our policies and hopefully strengthens the relationship between the board and these committees. And just to say, it does put additional responsibility on the board to think about direction and requests to the committees. So it sort of changes our modus operandi in terms of what we need to be thinking about on an annual basis in terms of these committees. And I think we might want to think about doing that sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are moving on to our consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to consider separately? I do have some questions on the contracts. Specifically, being a nurse, I see amounts of $100,468 and another line item of $322,560, and each description says to provide. Well, one says registered nurses district-wide for the $100,000, so that makes sense. But the next line says to provide a registered nurse district-wide for $322,560, and I just want to clarify that because I want that job.
You are correct. That's an error.
Okay.
It's
multiple nurses, hopefully?
multiple, yes.
Okay. Great. That makes sense. Just want to make sure. Any other questions on any of that from board members? Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I actually do have a quick question on the CIS contract for $300,000. I noticed that it was being funded by ESSER, so that's money we'll have to find again next year.
Yeah, you're correct, and I'm working with them. We're working with them as a team to really try to figure out, what's a better partnership. Is it a financial support, or is it use of one of our facilities?
Okay.
And so again, we're exploring different options, but this will be something that we will discuss as we move through the school year.
And is that just a portion of our CIS? I would imagine, is that just, what is that exactly for?
Mm-hmm. It's our partnership with CIS.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't fully fund them. They have other funding sources.
Got it.
But it is our portion, our commitment to their services, because they do provide, just off the top of my head, with the number of personnel that they provide to our schools, it would probably cost us over $1 million to deploy.
Of course, they have separate funding. That makes total sense. I was like, we can't possibly be getting all of those services for $300,000. So, okay, thank you.
All right.
I'd like to move approval of the, do you have more questions?
Nope.
Okay, I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a second. Any other questions, concerns? All right. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Lovely, lovely work. Coming back after a little summer break. Looking at advanced planning.
I think we have 3 more things. Oh, no, those are all consent.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, I double checked as well. Advanced planning, we have the audit committee meeting next week, the entrance meeting, as was discussed earlier. Do we have a study session next week?
If I may.
Yes.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
I think we were going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Just want to make one announcement. There is a change to advanced planning. The first meeting, August 17th of the audit, will be changed from 12 o'clock to 1:15. And our audit members have been notified, and we'll make sure that they understand that there was a change being made.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have a study session next week?
No study session at this point. We're going to be tied up with welcoming students back.
Yes.
And so it is going to be a hectic week.
Plenty to do next
We
week.
will be out there welcoming students on Tuesday. I do want to make note, our first CRC meeting is at the end of the month as well.
Right, the 30th. So we'll be back here in 2 weeks. You will be notified if we need to have executive session that day, and we will have CRC the following week on the 30th. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Drive careful going home. Thanks to all the district staff and our wonderful reporters as well.